I think we have to start. We have a number of participants already joining this webinar. So allow me to start now. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to welcome you to today's webinar, 100% foreign ownership in the UAE, new environment for foreign direct investment on the eve of Expo 2020, organized jointly with the esteemed and distinguished Embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Vienna, and of course our partners, Crowe, United Arab Emirates. I'm pleased to give a special welcome to our VIP speakers and panelists. At the beginning, His Excellency Mr. Ibrahim Musharraf, Ambassador of the United Arab Emirates to Austria and a good friend of us. Most welcome to you, Excellency. And then His Excellency and my colleague, Hamid Mohammed bin Salim, the Secretary General of the Federation of the United Arab Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Also welcome His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Al-Mahri, Director of Investment and Stakeholdership Management at the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology. Her Excellency Mrs. Hind Al-Yuha, Director of Investment and Talent Attraction at the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Economy. And of course, our dear friend and First Secretary and Head of Economic, Political, Media Affairs Section at the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Vienna, Mr. Ahmed Al-Shuhi. And of course, our partner and also partner of Crowe, United Arab Emirates, Mr. Mako Susilo, and also Mrs. Debika Chandik, Senior Manager at Crowe, United Arab Emirates. Also, I would like to warmly welcome their excellencies, the Arab ambassadors to Austria who are joining us today. And of course, my dear colleagues, Secretaries General of the Joint Arab Chambers from around the world, and our esteemed members, partners, friends, joining us today from all over the world, by the way, from 4 continents. Ladies and gentlemen, we are presenting a country that has a view on our home earth from a distance of 56 million of kilometers from the space of universe, from the planet of Mars, and this with the UAE Mars mission to our earth. But one has to look to the details in order to have a full picture of the achievements of a very successful country. Austria, ladies and gentlemen, was one of the first countries who contributed to the tremendous development and construction activities in the UAE, and this since the early 16th, so before the foundation of the modern country, United Arab Emirates, at the early 70s. And this was in the 16th of the last century. And as an example, I will take the construction work in the harbors of Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and later also the port of Dubai by an Austrian company, which is AST. Over the years, trade relations between Austria and the United Arab Emirates have grown steadily. In 2020, the United Arab Emirates was Austria's top trade partner in the Arab region. At present, more than 400 Austrian companies operate in the UAE. With Austria's investments, they're being mainly in the industrial IT sectors, petrochemicals like the company of OMV, the plastic mining, Borealis. More Austrian companies have been widening their scope of operation in the UAE, especially in the construction and water sector, such as ILF constructing a leading Austrian company implementing desalination plants projects in the UAE. 2021 marks yet another milestone in the UAE as it hosts the much anticipated Expo 2020, the first World Expo in the MENA and the South Asian region, seeking to connect minds and shape the future through sustainability, mobility, and opportunity. In June 2021, the United Arab Emirates started implementing a new foreign investment law, enabling 100% foreign ownership of companies. In other words, foreigners setting up a company in the UAE will no longer need an Emirati shareholder or agent. Through the various presentations and the possibility to see questions pertaining to the matter at hand, today's webinar seeking to provide the interested business community with an overview of the UAE's economic landscape and recent developments, as well as the legislative framework and advantages of the new law. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoy and benefit out of our webinar, and allow me to give the floor to a very dear friend, His Excellency Ambassador Al-Musharraf. Ambassador Al-Musharraf is doing a very interesting and very hard job promoting the relationship between Austria and the UAE, and giving a very wonderful view to his nice country in Austria. Allow me to welcome Abu Abdurrahman. The floor is your Excellency.
Thank you, Baimar. Thank you so much for this introduction. I guess you've done half of my speech already, and I thank you for it. And it is, I have to say, it is a pleasure to be able to work with the Austrian partners. Without further ado, I will just begin by thanking the Austro-Arab Chamber of Commerce for its permanent support and cooperation, as well as Crowe for co-organizing this event. The UAE has recently, as you probably all know, has drawn its strategy for the upcoming 50 years by outlining 10 principles, out of which the second and the seventh, which are of interest to us today, are mandated to economic achievements for the country for the coming 50 years. The second principle in particular states today to completely focus over the upcoming period on building the best and the most dynamic economy in the world. Whereas the seventh principle states that the digital, technical, and scientific excellence of the UAE will define its new development and economic frontiers, and the solidification of its position as a capital for talent, for companies, and investments. So, ladies and gentlemen, the UAE government has also announced the launch of a bold new series of national strategic projects that will lay the foundation for a new era of growth for the UAE, both domestically and internationally. A series of 50 significant economic projects starting this September to lead the next phase of growth. And among the pillars of the UAE Centennial 2071 is also a diversified knowledge economy, which aims to be competitive and one of the best economies worldwide. The new project aims to advance the UAE economy, a top national priority, to ensure a decent life for citizens and residents, double the foreign direct investment, and boost the UAE status as an incubator for talents and investors from all over the world. They aim to transform the UAE into a comprehensive hub in all sectors and areas of creativity, innovation, and in positioning the UAE as a land of opportunities and a destination for those seeking a global test of bold and successful ideas. It is important to mention that last week, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Austria, Mr. Schellenberg, met with Abdullah Mohammed Al-Mazroui, Chairman of Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce and Industry, where the minister praised the UAE's regional and global stature and its capabilities in attracting investments through business incubators. He also highlighted the incentives which the UAE has to offer foreign businesses to attract more investment and encourage innovation in all sectors. This is the first high-level visit from Austria to the UAE after the establishment of the strategic partnership between the UAE and Austria, which was signed in July this year by His Highness the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and the Federal Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, where both countries are advancing their economic partnership and promoting mutual trade and investment. Dear friends, today I take this opportunity to give you a short overview about the 100% foreign ownership in the UAE, especially now that as we prepare for Expo 2020 in Dubai. Foreign direct investment in the UAE is regulated by law, of course, which aims to promote the investment environment, to expand and diversify the production base, and to attract foreign direct investment in advanced technology, knowledge, and training. The UAE has implemented a legislative change that permits 100% foreign ownership of certain onshore companies effective June this year. The amendment to the companies law allows foreign investors to own up to 100% of the business. Before the issuance of this law, foreign investors could hold only 49%, where the rest goes to the local partner of 51%. The UAE has implemented a legislative change in this context to mainly attract the investors from outside. In the resolution issued by the UAE cabinet in 2020, it named 122 economic activities in the positive list, which means that this positive list, that there are 3 categories in which an investor can launch its business, and they are as follows. They are the agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector, and the service sector. Benefits of 100% ownership are as follows. It obviously reduces overhead company setup costs, facilitates ease to doing business for foreign investors, provide flexibility of operations for any business, opens the door to the establishment of more companies by investors. And during the course of this webinar, we will definitely hear more in depth about the 100% foreign direct investment in the UAE from the distinguished guests that we have with us today. I am very proud to present you at the end of this Expo 2020. Yes, delayed by a year due to the pandemic, but will definitely open its doors October 21st this year. and it's going to last for the next 6 months, of course. It is the first World Expo hosted in the Middle East, as you rightly mentioned, Mother, and with over 200 countries participating, which will present an immense opportunity to inspire, empower, and drive lasting positive environmental, social, and economic change on the global scale, ensuring a meaningful and measurable legacy. The Expo will have a theme, as you said, connecting minds, creating the future, with the subtitles, opportunity, mobility, and sustainability. It is going to be a festival and a platform where people from all over the world come together and connect with each other, share ideas, learn and innovate. It is a place you can come and have fun as well. But Expo 2020 Dubai is not just about entertainment. Business leaders will be encouraged to connect, and budding entrepreneurs will be nurtured under the Thrive and the Thrive Together in the environment. Designed Expo, of course, to leverage the connecting people from all over the world. I have so much to say about Expo, obviously, but yet I will stay there, I will stop there, and I will encourage you all to come and see it and experience it. Without going any further, I thank you for listening to me today, and I will be looking forward to listening your views on the subject that we have in hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for the wise words, shedding the light on the bilateral relation between Austria and the beloved country, United Arab Emirates, and the recent developments of the mutual visits. And of course, if there are visits coming inbound to Austria, it is your work and your success as well, and the other way around as well. So we are very proud to have you here, and of course shedding the light on some changes or some development, of course, on the investment law and the topic we are talking about today, and of course the Expo 2020 that we love to join. And Your Excellency, as we all know, our federal president will join the Expo 2020 at the 19th of November with a delegation, and it will be a second delegation headed by the Viennese governor and president of the Viennese Chamber, and we will be there as well at the beginning of next year. And there will be a lot of happenings, also supported by the Arab chambers. And allow me to step to my dear friend, His Excellency Humaid Mohammed bin Salim, the Secretary General of the Federation of the United Arab Chambers of Commerce and United Arab Emirate Chambers of Commerce and Industry. He also had many other official functions, like the member of the UAE National Assembly, Director General of Al Quwain Chamber of Commerce, Industry, and member of Board of Director of the International Chamber of Commerce. Humaid, the floor is yours, my dear friend. Please.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you, my colleagues and longtime friend. To start with, I would like to say good evening, good morning, good afternoon. It depends on wherever the ladies and gentlemen are joining us today. Let me say, or start by saying congratulations on the wonderful timing of this webinar. First, as His Excellency Ambassador mentioned about the timing of Expo. Expo is coming soon. It's a matter only of weeks. And we're betting on having one of the best Expo ever here in the United Arab Emirates and Dubai to be in particular. Also, as the United Arab Emirates is evolving as one of the most dynamic, competitive, and attractive hubs for investment that could be found anywhere in the world, especially nowadays. As a Secretary General of the Federation of the UAE Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and in my role as the Chairman of International Chamber of Commerce, United Arab Emirates, that's the ICC UAE chapter, I am very proud to be part of this event and very happy to welcome you all to today's forum, wherever you are joining from. The subject of today's webinar is 100% foreign ownership in the United Arab Emirates. Is of great importance in making the UAE an even more attractive destination for foreign investments. From the webinar's agenda, I can see that participants will benefit from the knowledge of all the real experts on the subject matter of the 100% ownership. However, I would like to briefly mention a few additional factors which I believe has positioned the United Arab Emirates at the top of the list of investment destinations. The UAE has become a welcoming home for amazing mix of nationality and cultures, with talented people available to work and to live in the United Arab Emirates from almost 200 countries of the world. The UAE has evolved as the leading hub for international business, with air connections for passengers and freight to more than 250 cities around the world. Shipping lines carry cargo to more than 400 cities, ports across the globe. To foster investment, business, and especially trade, there is no tax on investors, corporates, or individuals. The UAE has been a pioneer in creation of enterprise-driven free zones, and there are now more than 40 free zones in operation across the country. These free zones have proven to be of a great value in the expansion of SMEs and building enterprises that can connect from the UAE to global markets. The introduction of the 10-year golden visa, which announced lately, provide a long-term residence to investors, business owners, and talented professionals, will further enhance the already world-class investment ecosystem of the United Arab Emirates. These are just some of my reasons to believe that the UAE become the top investment destination for the businesses that want global reach, and local expertise. And as His Excellency Ambassador said, I will leave the details to the expert later on to speak about the 100% ownership. In my role as a chairman of ICC UAE, I am pleased to advise here as the ICC UAE. The ICC UAE, we share a very important prize and a very important acknowledgement with our friends in ICC Austria. In 2020, ICC UAE and ICC Austria were identified by the ICC headquarters in Paris as the two most active chapters of the International Chamber of Commerce, facilitating trade across the globe, network of more than 100 countries. I guess this means that in the current year, 2021, there will be a friendly competition between ICC Austria and ICC UAE. However, emphasize on friendly as international friendship between nations, it's essential to build bridges between people across which investment, trade, and businesses will flow. Wishing you all with this important and timely event. Thank you, and I wish you a fruitful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Hamid Mohammed bin Salim, and congratulations to be competing with Austria when it's come to the International Chamber of Commerce. And Dr. Scheidlin, Burger Scheidlin, I will tell him this, by the way. He's not joining us today, but I will let him know that there is a competition. But just for your information, Austria and Emirates has a lot of similarity, and when it's come to the amount of population and some factors, we will get to them later on. Thank you very much. By the way, for the audience, the Federation of United Arab Emirates Chambers of Commerce has currently the presidency of the Union of Arab Chambers. So we also have a very strong cooperation on that matter, and the UAE is heading the entire Arab countries when it's come to the chambers. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me
thank you. If you may allow me, Abu Omar, to thank you, Excellency, for your kind words. But I have only one thing to say. Thank you for the pressure that you are putting on me. With the matter of competition and competing with the Austrians. Thank you again.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you, Excellency. Now, our next speaker and presenter will be our dear friend, Mr. Ahmed Shahi, the First Secretary and Head of Economic and Political Media Affairs Section at the Embassy of United Arab Emirates in Vienna. Mr. Ahmed, the floor is yours. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Madar, and good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. It's our pleasure to welcome you to our webinar, and I hope this webinar will lead for more informations, figures, and status about UAE, investing in UAE, and all the details related to. So I will start today with an overview of UAE economy, quick fact sheets, quick facts on the population, the GDP, as you can see in 2021, with more than $400 billion with 1.4 growth, 1.4% growth, according to the IMF, and with the aim to double the economy to 3 trillion dirhams. That's around $816 billion, $16 billion over the next 10 years, and that's a indicator on how the government, UAE government, is working to enhance the economy in all sectors. If there will be a comparison, I would like to say in 1971, when 50 years ago, when the country has been established, the GDP at that time were less than $3 billion. With a growth about 99% in the GDP. About the growth, it is estimated to grow by 2.5% this year, according to the Central Bank of UAE, and by 3.6% to the non-oil economy. In 2022, the economy growth is forecast to expand 3.5% and 3.9% for non-oil growth. To talk about business environment, the UAE have a long-term political stability with more than 100 mission abroad, more than 200 foreign diplomatic missions in the country. The UAE hosts more than, as His Excellency and His Excellency Hamid, His Excellency Ambassador and His Excellency Hamid mentioned, the UAE hosts more than 200 nationalities. They can practice their businesses, practice their beliefs, religions. The UAE have allowed them to have their places of worships and with tolerance and respect to diverse culture. And the government has also adopted effective anti-discrimination, anti-hatred regulations. With UAE recent laws and legislation, as His Excellency Ambassador mentioned before, the new amendment law on companies, which has been enforced in June last year, full ownership of all economic sectors with exception of strategic activities like security, defense, bank, currency, printing, telecommunication, and etc. We have law on bankruptcy that provide legal framework to help distressed companies in the UAE to avoid bankruptcy and liquidation through different mechanisms. We have also some regulations with regards to the free zones. To talk about what's make UAE one of the world's most attractive investment hubs, it's because the increasing of investment attractiveness and the location, the strategically located between Europe, Asia, and Africa. It's just 8 hours fly away from half of the world population. The UAE position at a global crossroads has enabled it to become an economic hub for trade, exchange, innovation, and value creation. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, UAE was ranked the 15th biggest recipients of foreign direct investment in 2020. And in 2020, the UAE ranked also the first in the West Asia region in terms of foreign direct investment, FDI, accounting for 54% of a total FDI inflow in the region. The foreign direct investments into the United Arab Emirates achieved a growth of nearly 44% during the year 2020 compared to 2019, reaching $19.8 billion, despite the COVID pandemic that has cast a shadow on the volume of investment trade and world economies. The cumulative balance of FDI inflow increased, amounting to about $174 billion and achieving growth of 12.9% during the same period. The UAE have also ranked the 9th in the IMD World Competitive Yearbook in 2020. It's the only Arab country to have maintained its position among the top 10 competitive countries for 4 years in a row. The UAE was ranked the 3rd in government efficiency, 4th in economic performance, and 7th in business efficiency. The UAE was ranked 1st in 23 global indicators, and among top 5 in 52 indicators, and among top 10 in 106 indicators. Attractive investment incentives, that include also in addition to 100% ownership in free zones and within the Emirates, the low inflation, low custom tariff, between 0 to 5% for almost all goods. And also effective visa, the system which the government has issued 2 years ago for 10 years residents that include the investors, talents, students with high grades, artists, and professionals in specific areas. Infrastructure and logistics, well, the UAE have spent billions of dollars in the past 50 years in enhancing its strategic geographic location and infrastructure and the logistics within the country. The UAE is directly connected to more than 250 cities around the world. It's have 10 civil airports, 27 airline licenses, more than 43 free zones. It's have advanced digital infrastructure, ranking first Arabic world and 8th in the online service index by the UN e-government development in EGDI. The UAE also ranked 3rd globally for its investment infrastructure projects and infrastructure facilities. And here are the promising foreign investment sectors in UAE. That include renewable energy, blockchain, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, e-health, and etc. And as you can see here, there are many potential investments for foreign investors, especially in the future sectors that the UAE have made a lot of progress and efforts in doing so. To talk about why invest in UAE, well, there's many reasons why investing in UAE. It's because the trustworthy investment hub, ease of doing business. The UAE was ranked last year 16th globally out of 193. Comparing to 10 years ago, it was ranked 33. So that's almost 50%, or that's almost 100% more to what it have achieved before, or what have been ranked before. We do not have income tax or corporate tax, as His Excellency Hamid bin Salem mentioned before. And we are a global hub for startups. And by the way, we have also appointed last year Minister for State for SMEs and Startups. It's also about the effective government strategies, and I will later on show you some of the future strategies of UAE in the coming 50 years to go. To talk about strategic infrastructure location and judicial system, it's also important to mention the railway, the new project by the government of United Arab Emirates to have railways, and that will be next year. We also, and here you have some of the strategies for future-based economy. That include the UAE Green Growth Strategy, UAE Strategy for Fourth Industrial Revolution, Artificial Intelligence, Energy Strategy, and Blockchain. I will give you a short overview of the projects of 50. The UAE announced launching of 50 projects, which will be significant economic projects starting this September to lead this next path of growth in the UAE. The project will enhance the UAE regional and global position across all sectors, raise human competitive, and will ensure a decent life for its people and future generation. The UAE aims in these projects to attract more than $150 billion in the coming 9 years. The initiatives also will include visas for freelancers, skilled professionals, investors, entrepreneurs, and top students and graduates to sponsor themselves. Lastly, but not least, the Expo, as the UAE and Dubai will host the largest global event ever, which will held for the first time in Middle East, Africa, and South Asia, under the theme Connecting Mind, Creating a Future, and with subtitles Sustainability, Mobility, and Innovation. Expo Dubai it's a global experience dedicated to bringing together people, communities, and nations to build bridges and inspire actions and deliver real-life solutions to real-life challenges. Participants will explore solutions to fundamental global challenges, and visitors from all over the planet are invited to join the making of a new world as they explore new opportunities, embrace the opportunities of tomorrow, and discover life-changing innovation. With that, I want to end my presentation today by introducing two portals by the government, United Arab Emirates, for future investments, and who would like to know more or discover figures, facts about opportunities, invest process, regulation of investment. Please visit www.invest.emirates or invest.ae. And for any further clarification or inquiries, please do not hesitate to contact the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates in Vienna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. By the way, you have already answered one of the questions raised today, which touch the free zones 100% ownership, if it's also affect the free zones, and you've touched it and answered the question. Many thanks for the presentation, wonderful presentation, showing the ranking of the UAE and shed the light on the opportunities of possibilities for foreign investment in the United Arab Emirates. Also tackling the 50 projects which is published in the UAE, and of course the future-based economy, which is a very interesting topic. Allow me to step to our next presenter, who is Mr. Marco Cicilo, tax partner and from Crowe, United Arab Emirates. By the way, this gentleman is married to an Austrian lady, and therefore he is half, as I've said, Arab and half Austrian as well. So, and a very good partner. We are very delighted to have you, Mr. Cicilo, cooperating with us and also co-organizing the whole event. And we are very thankful for the fruitful input you are sharing with us. The floor is yours, Mr. Cicilo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kuja. You give some introduction of myself. Yeah, I mean, and also I would like to share with the audience as well as to a bit my experience, and I would relate it to the industry that my profession basically as a tax advisor. So I arrived here in 2009. And what I have seen so far from 2009 until today is that you have a lot of regulation that have been introduced, especially when it comes to certain part of tax. Yes, as the previous speakers have said, we do not have personal income tax, we don't have corporate income tax. However, the UAE are very supportive when it comes to tax transparency. And today, this is something that I would like to speak a bit further about the tax transparency as well, and the initiative that is pointed by the government. Now, I think the most important message of my presentation today is that these changes of regulation or addition of this regulation that we have, even though that has to do with the transparency, it doesn't actually scare the investors, actually increase the confidence of the investor to invest even more in the UAE, especially with the additional of the 100% or possibility to own your company 100%. And later in my presentation as well, I will share with you also the numbers of the FDI inflows. And it will correlate like really in the positive way. Like the more transparent the UAE becomes, the more confidence the foreign investor are to actually put their investment and their money in this country. So I will go to the next slide. Basically, I will just make it short. So this is going to be the 3 topics that I'm going to discuss today. The hallmarks of the changes in the law that has to do with the tax transparency. So some of the changes might have been covered by the earlier speakers, but I will try to just mention that in brief. And the FDI trend as well. Here you will see certain statistic of FDI inflows, what happened globally as in a trend, and as a trend, and also what happened in the UAE. And the next question is, what is next? I mean, there has been a lot of changes for the last, let's say, a decade. But what do we expect in the near future? I mean, that is apart from the 50 years, the 50s strategy from the UAE. So I'm going to touch more on the on what happened from the tax perspective. So I tried to start from 2010, where the UAE started to sign a global forum of transparency for exchange of information for taxation. This is with the OECD. And then for those of you who have lived here in 2017, the UAE introduced the CRS, the Common Reporting Standard. There's also a mechanism of automatic exchange of information. This is the result of signing the earlier initiative with the OECD. And a couple of things happened in 2018. The first one is the introduction of value-added tax. I mentioned here because this introduction actually regulate a lot, at least or start regulating a lot the businesses in the UAE in terms of keeping their books and basically so everything becomes much more transparent to the investors. Right, because now you have a tax authority that also forces those companies and can verify information that has been prepared by those companies to a certain extent. And thereafter, the UAE, again, as the continuation of signing the earlier Global Forum of Transparency initiative, the final UAE, the Joint Inclusive Framework on Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, is what we call the IFPEP. So later on, I'm going to use the word IF here. And of course, what is the most important part in 2018 is the issuance of the hallmark law for anti-money laundering and counter financing of terrorism. And then in 2019, as a continuity of the IF, is that there is a new law that has been introduced. This is what we call it the country-by-country reporting. So for multinationals who have a presence here, there's certain reporting will have to be done. And then the UAE also then introduced the economic substance regulation. And then in 2020, we have introduced the UBO register, like the one that you have in the EU, similar procedure. And then in just 1 second, because I cannot see. And in 2021, at least for from the 1st January until today, and as also the as a follow-up of all of the initiatives that have been started earlier, there has been a couple of changes in terms of the double tax treaties. One of them is basically between the UAE and Austria. So to create much more transparency in terms of exchange of information, they put certain paragraphs that were not there. And also a certain country, as a result of the earlier initiative as well with the OECD, and the multilateral instrument, which I'm going to touch upon a bit later, is that there is a synthesized double tax treaty. So basically, the tax treaty have been made in a way that it is now it supports the transparency internationally. Now let me go a bit on the technical side of taxation. So yes. There is, as mentioned earlier, the UAE has signed up with the inclusive framework with the OECD. So what happened is that under this initiative, the UAE is obliged to implement 4 minimum standards, which currently they are already implemented. So one of them is, I mentioned earlier, on the economic substance regulation. So here, when it comes to being transparent, is that if companies do not meet any economic substance here, then there will be a spontaneous exchange of information. And there is other business like IP, high-risk IP, that basically information will be exchanged as well. And then, as mentioned earlier, on the big, large multinational companies, there will be some reporting requirement. And then there is also what we call the multilateral instrument, where basically it's an instrument that modify most of the double tax treaty that are already in place with the UAE. Of course, with a certain requirement and condition as well for each of the agreement. Now, I'm going now to mention to present to you a bit more about the FDI. I think that would be the most interesting part, is that you have seen so far that there's been a lot of changes in the regulation. So what happened? I mean, for the foreign investors, right? Now let me take you a bit backwards. Like, okay, what happened actually in globally? What happened globally is that, as we have seen, is that there is a stagnation between 2018 to 2019 globally, right? So this data, it's I mean, I'm not going to go through the numbers here because the copy of this presentation will be made available to you soon. But I would like you to have a look at the pattern. But then this is what you see in terms of FDI inflow in the UAE. Now, I just want to draw your attention between 2018 and 2019, because 20 we do not have the data yet, and we expect this to also grow. And as you can see, where everything is stagnating in the world, you see that the FDI inflow in the UAE has grown also quite significantly. Like it has been mentioned by the previous speakers, you know, yes, there has been growth of FDI inflow, and you can see this. And despite all of this regulation that has been issued, these have actually even supported much more of this growth. That is our, let's say, opinion here. Now, if you look at it as well, I mean, apart from the interesting tax regime that we have here, one, and second of all, the legal infrastructure. I mean, there are a lot of other non-tax consideration to actually invest in the UAE. And I'm not going to mention much more because, again, so most of the things here have been covered by our previous speakers. But and again, if I would look at the data also in terms of foreign direct investment from Austria, there has been also significant growth. And having lived here in the UAE myself, it's I mean the stability and that has been offered by the UAE here. This is like the main attraction that we have in this region. Now, I think it has been mentioned by His Excellency about the news of the Austrian minister who visited the UAE. So I'm not going to go further on that. And that will be the last point of my presentation here is that what will come next in terms of this transparency rule and or in terms of the tax, what will happen, right? So there has been a lot of discussion with the, globally in the OECD BEPS that they are introducing what we call it the BEPS 2.0, where I think you have heard also in the market, this is what we call it Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Now, without going into the details, I just want to connect it as well into the transparency. First of all, we are heading even much more towards the transparency rules. The multinational companies, we need to also have a look at it and focus on various investment avenues. And it is expected also to benefit the country. So it is expected the investment will grow when the economic output of each jurisdiction, because of this initiative as well, it will grow even further. Now, with this level of changes as well, restructuring is basically, let's say, a natural progression that we need to look at as well for most of the multinational. So this is something that that is to be expected. Now, of my statement here, I have also quoted the statement from Mr. Syed Rashid Al Yatim as well on the 26th of July when it comes to the OECD PEPs. So basically, this is the conclusion of what I've just mentioned earlier. We would like to create really business-friendly environment that basically the UAE becomes the most attractive country in the world to actually to invest, while at the same time being a good citizen globally. So by that, I would, yeah, basically this is the end of my presentation. So again, thank you very much to AACC to co-organize this with us, and also to the UAE Embassy in Vienna. And if you have any further questions, so basically this is my contact details, and I will give back the floor to you, Mr. Kuja.
Thank you very much, Mr. Susilo, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you also for showing us the legislative development amendments through the 11 years, the past years, and also the relation to the tax regime in UAE. And it's, as you elaborated, it's a simple equation. If you open up the investment law, then you will get actually very good foreign direct investment, which shown in the figures 2020 around 19.9 billion of foreign direct investment to the UAE, which is the largest in the region, and one of the largest development worldwide as well. So it's amazing what is ongoing there. Thank you very much for the presentation. Allow me now to step to the next presentation and to His Excellency Abdullah Al-Mahri. He's the Director of the Investment and Stakeholder Management at the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology of the United Arab Emirates. Prior to this, he was heading the financial planning, budgeting, and reporting activities for ADNOC, downstreams, industry, marketing, and trading. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this invitation. I would like to start by thanking His Excellency for having me here, and for the Austrian UAE Business Council for arranging this event. I think it's a wonderful event, and as was mentioned previously, it comes at a perfect timing where Expo is about to start, and there's a few other also events that I could also mention towards the end of my slides. So today I will be presenting to you Operation 300 Billion, and Operation 300 Billion is the UAE's national strategy for industry. In July of 2020, the UAE has established the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology, and this is the first time the UAE had a ministry focused on industry. So that emphasizes the focus of the UAE's leadership on industry today. All right, so Operation 300 Billion, that's the code name for the UAE national strategy. I'll start by maybe giving you a few numbers. The number of industrial companies today are registered in the UAE are about 33,000 companies. We have about 773,000 employees in the sector. And in terms of contribution to the GDP, the contribution today is about 8.4%, and that's the manufacturing value add, so 133 billion dirhams. I saw the 400 number previously presented by our colleagues, and that was $400 billion as an estimate of the GDP in 2021. So here we're talking in dirhams. I just wanted to emphasize that. Now, when it comes to the national strategy, so as I mentioned, the national strategy was rolled out in March of 2021 after the establishment of the ministry in July of 2020. So you could see that the ministry was established right in the middle of COVID. And in determining the strategy for industry, a lot of the global shifts have been considered and taken into consideration. So among them is the shift towards sustainability and across various sectors, whether it's in energy or in production and industry specifically. Another one is we've seen the COVID-19 impact on the world, and some countries have reacted better than others, but resiliency and supply chain resiliency, medical technology, pharmaceuticals, these sectors became very, very important to the world. So this is a slide basically on the competitive advantages of the UAE. I'm not going to go too much into detail because all of the speakers that have started had taken us through this. Among them is the ease of doing business and being a logistical hub. Those were all competitive advantages that were mentioned. But one maybe very high level one, I think, is the agility and the responsiveness of the UAE government. The UAE government has reacted very well to in times of crisis. We've seen the reaction of the UAE after the financial crisis, the other ones, the reactiveness of the UAE during COVID. So this is a very, very attractive factor for business and investments. So as I mentioned, the ministry has been set up or formulated recently. I'm just going to mention the sectors that came together. So previously, industry was under another ministry. We had advanced technology as an office that reported directly to the PMO, or the Prime Minister's office of the UAE. Then we had the separate entity, which was ESMA, responsible for standards, metrology, conformity, and accreditation. And these three entities came together to form the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology. And the way we've seen it is advanced technology is meant to increase efficiency and competitiveness of UAE-based products across industries. ESMA, the standards entity, is meant to enable industry with the right standards, the right accreditation that will allow our products to reach international markets and open access to markets. So Operation 300 billion, as the code name mentions, the main objective is to increase the manufacturing value add from the current 133 billion that we have today to 300 billion. That's within 10 years, and that is more than doubling that amount. And these are very, very optimistic and very very optimistic targets that we would like to achieve, and these can only be achieved through partnerships. And a very good example of these partnerships is this setting here, where representing the UAE's focus and the UAE's strategy. And we've been engaging very closely with the industrial sector in the UAE, even since the establishment. And some of these engagements have been at His Excellency Dr. Sultan's level, where specific sectors we're engaged to identify challenges. And then once these challenges are identified, then initiatives that are at the federal level or the government level are put into place to address these challenges. And that is all to enable our industry. So in terms of objectives of Operation 300 billion, the strategic objectives are fourfold. The first one is to increase the attractiveness and the ease of doing business in the UAE. So that is one of the pillars. The other one is growing the competitiveness and enhancing the competitiveness of UAE-based products. And number three is to stimulate innovation and increase deployment of advanced technologies across the various industrial sectors in the UAE. And fourth is to boost the UAE's reputation as a hub for future industries. And I'll take you through what we classify as a ministry as future industries. So what composes the UAE's industrial sector today is mainly the sectors that you see here. Chemicals, petrochemicals, OMV was mentioned, the big investor in the UAE in that sector. We have heavy industries, steel and aluminum. We have the defense industry. We have electrical machinery and equipment. So these make up a good majority or a good portion of the UAE's industrial sector today. And we also have other sectors that have been identified, and these are the sectors that we have here, what we've classified as future industries. And we've classified them as future industries because we see the growth potential from these industries. And we would like to actually increase their contribution to the industrial sector as a whole. So these industries do exist in the UAE today, but are not at a level that we are satisfied with. So space, for example, is a sector that we have had our success stories with manufacturing of small satellite products or small satellite parts. Hydrogen is another sector that we see a lot of potential growth in, and is very important to the UAE today. Expo was mentioned. So in Dubai, there's a pilot plant that's producing green hydrogen today, and that green hydrogen will be utilized to power the buses and the transportation within Expo. We also have other entities in the UAE that are focused on producing other aspects of hydrogen, such as blue hydrogen, and that's being done mainly in waste. We have the pharmaceutical products. We've also had our partnerships there. And we have the sector exists. We have the Gulfar or the Jalfars in UAE, but we also aspire to increase those. We've had partnerships when it comes to producing vaccines also, and we're looking forward to actually further growing this sector in the UAE. Medical technology is also another one. We have Dubai Science Park in the UAE. Dubai Science Park is focused on providing an ecosystem for medical technology and pharmaceuticals to grow. Agritech is another very important one, and that really also stemmed from the impact that we've seen of COVID-19. Self-sufficiency and food self-sufficiency specifically has become a global focus. And we have Dubai's Agritech Valley that's in place today. And that which aims to more than triple the UAE's production in terms of food resources. So this is a summary slide on all the 11 sectors in one slide. I'll move on to some of the initiatives. So as I mentioned, there's 4 strategic objectives for Operation 300 billion. The first, for each objective, we have a few initiatives in place, and these initiatives are meant to achieve that objective itself. So we launched these initiatives that are targeting achieving each of the 4 objectives. So among them here, one of the initiatives that we've launched is reducing the reliance on imports by growing the local sector and local manufacturing. And we've mapped a target of 42 billion dirhams across our various priority sectors. So this is something that we're working on within the ministry. Another one is the in-country value, or the National In-Country Value Program. And that is meant to drive growth locally. It's a local content program which a lot of countries have established, and the UAE has started this program at Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, and they've seen various impacts in terms of growth and growth potential and contribution towards increasing local content in the country. So the ministry has adopted this program, and the idea is to take this program and roll it across the country as a national program that will increase the UAE's GDP. There's also a specific strategy focused on advanced technologies, and it has three main pillars. The first one is creating an integrated ecosystem to encourage R&D. So the UAE, the Prime Minister's office has recently announced the establishment of the Emirates R&D Council, which will be led by His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed. And that is meant to drive and focus R&D spending into sectors that will contribute towards the GDP. Another pillar, which is very important, is also boosting the industrial efficiency. So this is also falling within the Operation 200 billion specific objective. So through advanced technologies, increasing efficiency, and there's several programs under that that through technology would increase efficiency across sectors. So there's training of CEOs that is being done in 4th IR technology. There is also an assessment that's being done for various industries in terms of your score. So a company would be evaluated for their level of technology deployment, and actually would get a recommendation to report what kind of technologies can they deploy to actually increase their efficiencies. The third pillar is launching an advanced technology agenda for the various sectors across the 11 sectors that I mentioned. So another initiative that's also ongoing in the UAE is Made in the Emirates, and that's briefly just a brand. Honestly, it's a brand to have a name that would recognize UAE products. And you see the logo there on the top left, Made in the Emirates. So Make It in the Emirates is another also campaign that I'd like to mention. So sometimes it is mixed up with Made in the Emirates or Made in UAE, Made in the Emirates. Made in the Emirates is a brand which I mentioned earlier. Make It in the Emirates is more of a call for action or a campaign. This was very popular on social media a few months ago, the launch of the strategy. So it's a call for action for investors, entrepreneurs, and startups to come and make it in the UAE, to establish themselves in the UAE. So we have a platform on our website, moyat.gov.ae, where an applicant can come and reach out specifically to the Ministry of Industry for any support that's needed, whether it's funding or financing requirements, or just challenges that they're facing in terms of establishing and setting up in the UAE. A little bit maybe about the incentives. I think there's a lot of incentives that were mentioned already. I'm not going to go deeply into these, but I think maybe I'll mention some of them that are specific or more focused towards industries specifically. So there's an initiative that's ongoing in the UAE. This is an ongoing effort, and that's to have a strategic gas and electricity rate for the industrial sector. That is to benefit the industrial sector in the country. Another one is financing solutions. So this is something that we have through our strategic partnerships with Emirates Development Bank. We offer competitive financing solutions with interest rates starting from 3.99% and payback periods of up to 12 years. The in-country value program I have already mentioned. Then another one maybe that's important is that we have mutual recognition with over 89 countries in the fields of specification and standards, and these enable UAE products to reach external markets. Other than that, I think there's others that are mentioned, like the Golden Visa, which were mentioned previously, the adoption of advanced technology and training provided for the sector is also something that I've mentioned earlier. But maybe one that is also specific to industry here is the duty exemptions that the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology offers. So raw materials that are imported for your production in the UAE are exempt from the duty 5% that the UAE charges on imported products. And so is CapEx that you use for machinery and equipment. So these are exempt from the usual 5%. That brings it to the end of my presentation, but I'd also like to take the chance to use this platform to also invite you and maybe mention one of the events that's happening on the sidelines of Expo, and that is GMIS, or the Global Manufacturing Industrial Summit. The Global Manufacturing Industrial Summit is under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, and that will be on the sidelines of Expo. It will be between the 22nd and the 27th of November. And the theme there is rewiring societies or repurposing digitalization for prosperity. The focus is going to be on technologies and advanced technologies and industries. It will be honestly a very, very good event for industries from all over the world to come and showcase themselves in Dubai. It's an opportunity where the whole world is coming to the UAE, and that week of the 22nd to the 27th is a very good opportunity for companies to come and showcase themselves. If there's anything needed in terms of support with regards to connecting yourself to GMIS, whether it's exhibiting or sponsoring or even attending, please let us know. We have several brochures. The event is co-chaired by the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology and UNIDO. There's a few other events, maybe also I could mention highly, and that's the Dubai Air Show. It's also happening in mid-November from the 14th to the 18th. That's a very good conference for companies in the aerospace industry. Another one is ADIPEC, and that's a very popular event also between the 15th and the 18th. So kind of overlapping there with the Dubai Air Show, but that focus is more on oil and gas and energy companies. And that brings it to the end of our slides. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And please reach out to us if you need any further support.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Al-Mahri, for the wonderful presentation. And I'm really delighted to hear that 8.4% of the GDP of 133 is FDI. And as we witnessed and have seen, the participation and the percentage of the FDI will increase due to these new regulation and hopefully also with the boost of our webinar as well. And very interesting to me, the vital sectors you elaborated on the development and competitiveness. And when you touch various sectors, and especially also hydrogen, which is the future, I think we do have in Austria an outstanding technologies keeping the hydrogens in storages. And this is not only the Technical University of Vienna, but also the company Lind, who has a tremendous development and innovation in capturing hydrogen. As you know, hydrogen is a very volatile gas, and it explodes very easily. And to capture them, it's very interesting. And other topics that you touched as well. And GMIS, I had the honor 5 years before or 6 years was it, I think, to inaugurate the GMIS initiative at the UNIDO conference in Vienna. So thank you very much again. Let us present our next lady speaker. I'm very honored to have Her Excellency Hind Al-Yuha, the Director of Investment and Talent Attraction at the Ministry of Economy of the United Arab Emirates. She is a member in different committees, such as the National Agenda Economy Pillar and the Investment Committee, and undertook major leadership roles at the Dubai Government Department of Civil Aviation, Roads and Transport Authority, and Dubai Customs. Madam, the floor is yours.
Greetings to Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be virtually with you today, and I apologize about my voice. I'm not feeling well, but we'll start with our presentation on the UAE investment ecosystem. We'll start with the UAE economy, investment environment, why UAE, the main prominent features and investments granted to foreign investors, and the FDI strategy. UAE economy, our leaders future shapes the economy and had a plan to diversify the economy, and the numbers are a proof that this strategy is successful and effective. 70% of the GDP comes from the non-oil sector, and 30% of the GDP comes from the oil sector. The diversified activities, the economic activities from the 70% comes from the wholesale, manufacturing, and my colleague, Dr. Abdullah Al-Mahri gave you an extensive great presentation about the manufacturing sector, construction, financial and insurance, transportation, real estate activities, public administration and defense, electricity, gas, information and communication, professionalism, technical activities, accommodation, food services, and other services. Looking at our top 10 trading partners, China is our number 1 trading partner, second largest India, non-oil foreign trading partner, I mean Saudi Arabia, USA, Switzerland, Iraq, Japan, Oman, Germany, and Kuwait. In 2015, our leaders had a plan to build a knowledge-based economy, and innovation is a critical pillar, a critical component in order to build an innovation strategy. And 7 key sectors are catalysts to build a knowledge-based economy, which are renewable energy, transport, education, health, technology, water, and space. And these sectors are really the sectors in which we attract investment in. Some of the UAE, Austria promising sectors for cooperation, artificial intelligence, logistic, pharmaceutical, renewable energy, emerging technologies, information technology, fintech, and tourism. These sectors we think are the sectors that we can attract and cooperate on to attract investments.
Madam, I think your mic is off. Could you turn it on, please? We don't hear it.
Oh, sorry. UAE investment environment. Before going into the details of our investment environment, I would like to touch upon the numbers. We advanced 9 ranks globally in the inflow of investment in 2020, which was the year of crisis. We were ranked 24 globally in 2019, and we reached to 15 globally in 2020. 19.9 billion US dollar was the inflow of investment with a growth rate of 11.2%. And we were number 1 in Arab countries, number 1 in Middle East and North Africa, and number 1 in West Asia. We developed and progressed 6th rank in the outflow of foreign investment in 2020. We ranked 13 from 19 in 2019 with 18.9 billion US dollars and outflow of investment, where we are number 1 in Arab countries, number 1 in Middle East and North Africa, and number 1 in West Asia. We have 134 agreements to encouragement and protection of taxation. And about the golden visa, His Excellency Hamid bin Salim covered it in details about the golden visa and give you a detailed golden visa information about it, and he directs you how to get this golden visa. UAE investment environment. UAE investment environment is ranked by stability, modern infrastructure, effective economic policy, and modern economic legislations. Strategic trade hub offering access to regional markets. We just launched the green visa and the freelance visa, free transfer of profit and revenues and assets, no income tax, efficient legal and court systems, laws to protect capital such as intellectual property rights, competition, money laundering, and trust. We in the UAE, a country that have 200 nationality living in it in peace and tolerance. We accept all religions, we accept all religions and nationalities. We accommodate with them in happiness, and it's a favorable destination for all nationalities and religions, as I said. We have a world-class infrastructure, low custom tariffs between 0 and 5%, stable currency value within freedom of exchange with other currency, no restriction, ambitious legislative reforms, and our laws are transparent. Our government work electronically. Even though we had the COVID, our government was still performing global aviation hub. Why UAE? What is so special in UAE? We are 4 billion of people, live 50%, which is 50% of people live away, 8 hours flight away from the UAE. We are the center in the market between the East, Africa, South Asia, and Central Asia. Ideal midpoint, deep water ports. 16 globally in ease of doing business. 25 globally in the World Economic Forum and #1 in the region. 11 globally in logistic performance. We are #1 in the region in homegrown tech unicorn like Kareem and Souk. 20 billion in FDI received annually. We have 11 startup accelerators. We are global leaders in talent attraction, 3rd globally and 1st regionally, a safe place to live in, and 18 globally in the Gender Inequality Index. Prominent feature of the new law. The new law provides 100% ownership in all sectors except strategic impact activities, full ownership in all legal forms of companies, possibilities of ownership in sectors with strategic impact under certain legislations, absence of the need of local service agents, freedom of settling dispute, allow members of board directors of public shareholding companies to be non-shareholders, absence of minimum requirement for limited liability. You can control all the board members of the joint public companies, introducing partners, transfer company ownership, changing the legal form of the company, merging and acquisition, and in the United Arab Emirates, you will never reach to a liquidation. And with the economic research we did, these are the strategic impact activities, and most of our investors are not really keen in these activities: security, defense, bank and exchange, currency, telecommunication, Hajj and Umrah, Holy Quran, and fisheries. We have an FDI strategy focusing on a number of 16 sectors, but I highlighted earlier what are the potential sectors between us and Austria. And we provide investor care, we provide the data needed, facilitation between the investors and the government, between the investors and other businesses, aftercare services, networking, until the business start up and running. These are the sectors of outflow of investment. So if there is any potential investments in Austria, we would like to know them via our esteemed embassy, and we can find the appropriate counterpart in the investor in the United Arab Emirates and present to them the opportunity. When we invest as a UAE we don't interfere in politics. We transfer knowledge, we open doors for jobs, and our investments are long-term and strategic impact, and to build a relationship with the other, long-term relationship with the other country. You can reach us through our email investment@economy.ae. Thank you for your time. And again, apologies for my voice. I'm ill this week.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this wonderful presentation and outstanding one. And please get well, mashallah, although you have a wonderful voice that you have presented with. And Mrs. Hind shed the light on the FDI strategy, inflow and outflow, and also elaborated on the sectors of mutual investment between UAE and Austria in particular, but in general with the world. And allow me, because your good self is the Director of Investment and Talent Attraction, I can just present a world-leading virologist who is Professor Benninger, who has discovered SARS-1 medication, and now he's preparing the COVID-19 medication, a world-leading scientist in this region, Austrian born, and he was already presented to the esteemed embassy of UAE, and he's open to begin cooperation on the research sector in the virology. So thank you again very much for your...
Excellency, I would like to get his, if possible, via embassy, if my colleague Ahmed Al-Shahi can send across his documentation from our embassy, and we can take it through and see how we can cross-collaborate with him, and even maybe can go further with the talents visa or golden visa, what we can do from our end. So it will be a great pleasure if we can get the document from our esteemed UAE embassy in Austria.
Okay, for sure. I think the esteemed embassy will pass the information to your good self. Our next speaker is Mrs. Deepika Chandak, is managing the global mobility consulting arm of Crowe, UAE, and has over 9 years of professional experience in global mobility. Prior to this, she was working with Deloitte in Mumbai, India. The floor is yours, Mrs. Chandak.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khuja, and thank you to all the dignitaries on this webinar for all your valuable insight sharing, because somehow that has made my part very simpler in a way that I have to now focus purely on the corporate landscape of how in the UAE the corporate landscape has evolved. So all we have currently discussed, each one of the speaker was very much focused on the topic, which is the 100% foreign ownership law, and they have covered all aspects from their perspective in a way of tax transparency, investments, the numbers, the FDI numbers, which are really important, and so many other factors as to how the UAE landscape and the investment landscape looks like. So let me touch upon the corporate part, because at the end, the UAE 100% foreign ownership law is the law which has been, which has changed, or I would say modified the landscape here in terms of how we will be doing business going forward. And it's a welcoming change. So before I speak about each of the topics, the 3 topics that I would like to focus on is the timeline. I mean, for anyone to understand why this change happened, it's important for them to know as to what was the helicopter view of what happened so far and how UAE has evolved the corporate landscape for themselves. And now that there is 100% foreign ownership law, which means there is a possibility for you as a foreigner to own 100% in the UAE, what are the initial factors to be considered, the key ones? And the final takeaways would be like a summary of, I think, the entire session as to the takeaways for the audience. Now, these are the hallmark years, if I may say so, which had some or the other bits of corporate law changes. Now, considering that I want to keep it more generic so that the objective is achieved for people to understand, for the audience to understand how it is flowing, I will not get into the nitty-gritties of what article was changed and which provision was introduced, but just a brief idea. But in case there is someone in the audience who is very much interested in, okay, which exact law are we talking about, then the glossary terms would help you refer to the correct law. In 1984, I mean, as we all know, it was the commercial company law was enacted first time in the year 1984, and it is, as I said, it is known as the commercial company law. It was the first significant federal company legislation law which was enacted since the foundation of the UAE in 1971. So this basically specified as to how to establish a company and how to go about in terms of the compliances, giving a base, a strong base for any company to function here from a corporate perspective. Now, moving ahead, and just one point, in 1984, so basically it was established that if a foreign national has to come here and open a company, you're more than welcome. However, there was 51% ownership, which was still with, or 51% sharing with the local sponsor in the UAE. In 2015, there was a new law which was established. I wouldn't say new completely, in a way that there were some provisions which still stay as 1984. However, as the world is growing internationally, UAE had to obviously keep up to the international standards of the corporate governance. So there were various restrictions and maybe removal of restrictions which were introduced in 2015 with a more updated law, streamlining it with the international standards. That is the whole objective of making those changes. So until now, there is no talk of 100% ownership. Now, 2018 was a hallmark year where there was a major move to welcome investors via the specific decree law of 19, wherein it was allowed to have a foreign ownership in specific industries. So in 2018, there was a negative list of sectors, which I think a host of speakers have mentioned earlier. For example, security, defense, banking. So that was a clearly negative list of sectors, which is very much understandable. Followed by, in 2020, there was a positive list. Only the first pointer of 2020, if you may see, the Cabinet Resolution 16, there was a positive list of sectors eligible for FDI, which was introduced. Now, together, 2018 and 2019, together makes it a welcoming move. But there was a slight change here in terms of legislative terms, which a lot of people do get confused with. But to clarify, the changes in 2018 and this cabinet resolution, which is all synced together in a sense, was repealed by the new law, which is Federal Law 26. And this is the ownership law that we're talking about now, which is the topic of our whole webinar. And so now what stays is only Federal Law number 26. And all the red font that you see has been repealed. Now, what happened after 2020, in the second half of 2020, when this was introduced, one of the distinguishing factor was that the general requirement of Emirati participation, local participation in the companies and the branches of foreign company, it was removed, which means the branches may no longer require to have a LSA, a local service agent. And you can also own 100% ownership of your company, even in onshore. So that is a possibility which is very well given by the law. But even after this law in place, while the broad outline was very well specified, there were still burning questions from stakeholders in terms of, how the practical implementation would take place and, where to go, how to do all the things. So this ambiguity about the procedural aspects of the law, which was already introduced in 2020, but given the pandemic situation and many other reasons, the procedural aspects, everything, most of them were clarified only in the month of June 2021. So that is the reason June 2021 is looked at as more when the application started, when the authorities were able to answer more positively as to you need to fill this form, you need to give these documents, and just start having your companies 100% owned by you. So in one of the things which got clarified when the procedural aspects were clarified is that each emirate has its own approved list. So although the law is federal in nature, but every emirate can have its own a list of administrative setup required. Now just to bring the initial factors. So now that people, the audience or anyone else can come to the UAE and open a 100% owned company, there is a possibility. So what needs to be considered initially? I mean, I'm sure this is not an overnight decision which anyone would like to take. It is a well-informed decision. So just to share with you the key initial factors, the first one is you need to be careful as to which industry you are from. What are the activities that you really want to do in the UAE? You need to be very clear on that before you do your application. Because depending on your type of industry and depending upon the activity, the authorities, there is a host list of requirements for you, and the authorities may or may not allow you 100% ownership. Because as mentioned by the dignitaries in the earlier, amongst the earlier presentations, that there are these strategic list of activities which are still not allowed 100% ownership, which is understandable. The next two, I would say, are interlinked: the value of your foreign direct investment in the UAE and your future business plan. Now, if I may take the leeway of linking this to a very generic scenario, and if you want to start any business, I mean, it is not wrong for anyone to be able to, know as to what is the amount of foreign direct investment and what is your future plan, how are you planning to grow. So for anyone to know this, so authorities have also included these questions in their questionnaire, which is the application form. Now, in terms of practicality, depending on each of the application, the authorities will be able to judge and conclude as to whether 100% ownership should be allowed or not. The next one, as I said, everything is subject to the approval of authorities. And so once you do the applications, the authorities do have the right, and very well so, to ask for more documents or additional requirements depending on your specific case. There is no one thumb rule around this whole 100% ownership law at this point in time. And as I said, that since June onwards, as you see the timeline, it has started from 1984, and from 2018 now we're talking legislatively about ownership laws, 100% ownership laws. So once the administrative setup is in place, I would like to believe that it will evolve over time, and there could be more administrative changes and better requirement list coming up soon. So I would not use this as a thumb rule for any of my, any of the clients that I would support with in the applications. Then the last one is, as this was discussed earlier, and I wanted to emphasize on this, that there are these strategic activities which are not allowed for 100% ownership. Now, what are the key takeaways for everyone? Considering this is the last part of the session, I thought it is a good idea to just summarize what all of us would be wanting to, communicate to the audience. Is if you already have your existing presence in the UAE, then point number 1 and point number 2 is for you, which means you can restructure the shareholding pattern of your existing UAE onshore company. So if you currently have 51% with the local and yours is 49%, you may want to see as to how the restructuring can happen. if they will still retain to continue maybe say 20% or so, or maybe they go down to 0. So it's a mutual agreement, and then you will have to reach out to the authorities with your application. And the second thing, if you're not a LLC here, which means you're a branch here, possibly, then the second point is you may want to amend your existing local service agent agreement, because now there possibly is no requirement for a LSA in your business setup. So if you want to do that, then you can explore that option as well, subject to the approval of the authorities. Now, third and fourth is basically for the new FDIs, where you can establish your branch without the requirement of an LSA. And you can establish a company if you want, which is a LLC with 100% foreign ownership. All subject to the conditions, your document setup, or your document submissions, and subject to approval of the authorities. The last point is applicable to all of us. So while we're talking about only corporate landscape or the tax transparency, or how UAE is one of the key economics centers, we have to be considerate of the fact that when the business is opening up, it's not just the corporate law that it has to look at. You also need to check the nuances of what happens if you restructure. In the UAE, you have VAT regulations, you have, which is value-added tax, you have economic substance regulations, you have the immigration law and the labor law, and a host of other laws which should be well thought of before going ahead with any restructuring or new establishments. So this is the takeaway from our side. And that brings me to the conclusion of my presentation. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Over to you, Mr. Khuja.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chandak. By the way, how do you know that a webinar is successful? It's simply during the presentation, all outcoming questions by the audience has been already answered, and this is the case. And therefore, I'm very thankful for this wonderful presentation, Mrs. Chandak. We have a question recently. What are the specific areas we can have 100% ownership? And the question is, are there lists of sectors that are available to spread it to the gentleman who raised this question? Are there any list of that?
Yes, okay. Thank you for the question firstly. And yes, the simple answer is yes. But as I mentioned in one of the key considerations, it would also depend on which Emirates you're talking about. If you're talking about Abu Dhabi, they have a different list. If you're talking about Dubai, they have a different list of where you can have 100% ownership. So, and sector, industry, every variable matters.
Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, since we have run out of the time and we have already answered all questions, are there any questions? Yeah, so allow me to say the following. It is actually very easy, but also complicated to present an outstanding country, a country of extravagance, and this is the Emirates for sure. And I'm very happy that we have covered a lot when it's come to the recent development in this beloved country, United Arab Emirates. And I think we have covered all topics that is related to our topic today, which is the 100% foreign ownership. And we've seen the last year that UAE managed to get a huge foreign direct investment, and this is because of the law and the freedom of companies and investment in this nice country. Allow me to end the session by thanking all our VIP speakers, presenters, especially, of course, the Embassy of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Ibrahim Musharraf, of course, the Federation of Emirati chambers, and of course, both Ministry of Industry and Ministry of Economy, and of course, the Crowe and the team. And by the way, I would love to mention it was a huge effort by the team of Crowe, team of the embassy, and our team, Mrs. Layla Kaplan and Mrs. Zahra as well. They were all involved and engaged in the preparation and the nice happening and this outstanding and successful webinar. Hope to see you soon. Thank you. Yeah, and I seen that my brother Humaid Muhammad bin Salim raised his hand. Please, the floor is yours, Mr. Humaid.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you for the brilliant management of this webinar and for the information that you gave to us also. I would like just to say something to summarize this 100% ownership in the United Arab Emirates. It's easier than it sounded in general. It is in all sectors, except there is a few other sectors, which is like petroleum, military, and some of the banking. And even the banking, there could be a partnership. So to put it in easy and short term, and to put it very clear, it is almost in every sector. We have here more than 122 sectors where foreign ownership can apply. Whether if there is anything in more detail or any more information in a specific sector, they can contact us or contact the embassy or the ministry, and they can do. And there is a site for the FDI, for the foreign direct investment, and there's all the information is there. I just wanted to say that. I thank all my colleagues, and thank you very much for inviting us. We are very glad to be part of this great webinar. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. By the way, we just received one question. If somebody would like to answer, what about the crypto trading? Are there any regulation? It is allowed or it is forbidden? Do you want? If somebody would like to, do you have any answers to this question? Crypto trading? Yeah, Mrs. Manal, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to reconfirm that crypto licensing is available in the UAE, and we just, in fact, connected one brilliant UK investor, which inquired a crypto license in Abu Dhabi Global Market. So I just want to reaffirm that crypto licensing is available in the UAE.
Okay, and it's allowed?
Yes, under certain legislations with certain legislative authorities in the UAE, such as Abu Dhabi Global Market.
Many thanks for this. Now it's everything easy. Thank you very much for the elaboration, Mrs. Manal, and of course my dear friend and colleague Humaid Muhammad bin Salim as well. And thank you also for this easy presenting the sector who are not included in this 100%. And I would like to recall again, it's oil, military and banking with only with the local partners. But the sectors which are open for 100% foreign ownership is 122 sectors. In this, His Excellency Ibrahim Musharraf would like to say something. Please, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Abu Amar, thank you very much for this event, and thank you for the opportunity to see everybody. And but I have a question for you, my friend. What does this the signing of the strategic partnership mean to the Austrian side of investors? if there is any elaboration that is needed in this regard, please let us know on. But it's out there. There's a lot of info with regards to this partnership. But I need to hear from your side, how has it opened certain gates, doors for opportunities in the future for the Austrians?
Excellency, thank you for the question. First of all, our duty is to promote and present the outcome and the content of this presentation to all our partners and actors, not only in the UAE, companies in the UAE, but also companies who are not yet in the UAE. So to let them know, to present to them the new amendments and open up laws for foreign direct investment. And I think also it is our mutual role to have various activities, and hopefully soon in person in Austria, but also in the United Arab Emirates, mutual delegation that we visit the United Arab Emirates, but also receiving a delegation with business people and potential partners, and also, of course, from the public sector from both sides to strengthen this relation. And one is very important also to encourage the Austrian companies to visit the Expo 2020, which is very crucial, and we are very heavy engaged, by the way, in that, and we are trying in every single possibility that we have and interaction to the Austrian companies, European companies, to ask them participating in the opening, but also in the visit of His Excellency, the Federal President at the 19th of November, and also visiting GIMIS. It's very, very important. But we have a lot of work, mutual work that we have to do on our side, but also in cooperation with your esteemed embassy. And I would love also to see the Spanish horse riding school joining our federal president, and I do have some information for your Excellency. I would love to share with it later after this session. But do you have any another question? I'm sorry, since we are receiving. Are there a manual for 100 foreign ownership, including the list of activities and minimum requirement and regulation for each sector? Part of this question has been already answered by Mrs. Debika, but I think if there is any link to a list of sectors of 100 ownership, regardless, or when it's come to Emirate Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah, and other Emirates, are there any lists again to that? Mrs. Chanda, can you answer this? Please turn on your mic. I don't hear you.
You need to
yeah, okay, sorry.
Can I take this?
Please.
So you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Now, as Ms. Manuel has mentioned earlier, and also His Excellency Mr. Humayt as well, the process, speaking from a practical experience, is exactly the same like establishing any other LLC. So it is going to be the same thing, right? So it is quite straightforward, and basically the only thing is that you just need to present that, okay, for a certain type of companies that is not a part of this industry, that is not allowed, that we would like to open a company with 100% ownership. And in most of the cases, at least in our experience, we will get the approval. So there is no special requirement. And I think it's also mentioned in one of the presentation, in one of the earlier speakers as well. In terms of the minimum share capital as well, there is no specific one. And it is also mentioned in our law, because the law also mentioned, our commercial company law states that there is no minimum share capital. So again, yes, you can contact the dignitaries of, who have presented earlier, or if you know us as Crowe, we can also support you here with the relevant documentation for this. But in short, it shouldn't be that difficult.
So thank you, Mr. Susilo. I will stop receiving questions, otherwise we are exaggerating when it's come to the time. Again, I will repeat my thanks to all of you. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Thank you all institutions, ministry, and also the esteemed embassy of the UAE in Austria, and all participants, and of course Crowe for the wonderful preparation. Thank you all, and God bless you, and maybe we will see us soon in another webinar. All the best, and please visit the Expo 2020. Thank you. Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.